Flicking through the channels last night, I discovered that PJ and Duncan, who of course grew up to become Ant and Dec, have developed a bit of a sideline while presenting this season of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, in holding Boris Johnson and his clown car of a cabinet to rather higher account than most political journalists.
It is all change in Camp Now, though, because yesterday the celebs chose a new leader via the gift of a secret vote.
And that means David's reign is over. But they weren't celebrating.
No.
They didn't have a party. They categorically deny any suggestions that they had a party. And this fictional party definitely didn't involve cheese and wine or a secret Santa.
Evening, Prime Minister! For now.
Westminster bubble, anybody? On prime time ITV, and of course demonstrating that the presenters Ant and Dec managed to move on a sixpence because the story only broke yesterday evening. If you're not aware of the story, then welcome back from whatever rock it is you've been hiding under for the last 12 hours. Here is Allegra Stratton, appointed by the Prime Minister as a sort of special spokesperson, and she was supposed to be the one that would helm the regular press conferences in that £2-point-something million specially built studio that then got put on ice, and she got shifted off to being in charge of COP26 or something. It's rather hard to keep up. But she was a sort of senior communications person at the time of the clip you're about to hear. This occurred on December the 22nd of 2020, and it refers to a party alleged to have taken place, or it reportedly refers to a party alleged to have taken place in Downing Street, attended by about 40 people. And they think it's funny.
I've just seen reports on Twitter that there was a Downing Street Christmas party on Friday night. Do you recognise those reports?
I went home. Hold on.
Would the Prime Minister condone having a Christmas party?
What's the answer?
I don't know.
It wasn't a party, it was cheese and wine.
Just be clear, it's not.
Is cheese and wine all right?
No.
It was a business meeting.
I'm joking.
Is this recorded? This fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced.
Funny, yeah. 6 minutes after 10 is the time. And of course, any hopes that they may have with the benefit of hindsight realise that this is no laughing matter were rather undone on Monday night when Jacob Rees-Mogg stood up in front of the Institute of Economic Affairs, no less, and cracked even more jokes.
I see we're all here obeying regulations, aren't we? I mean, this party is not going to be investigated by the police in a year's time. You are all very carefully socially distanced. We've moved, I'm pleased to tell you, from the metric back to the imperial system. I know you were at least 2 inches of regulation, which is, as I understand it, what the regulations require during the social distancing period.
As comedians often say, I wouldn't open with it, Jacob, but he did. He went there, and he still thinks it's funny. I wonder what you were doing on December the 18th. And I wonder whether you feel today that Allegra Stratton and Jacob Rees-Mogg and all of the cabinet ministers have queued up all week to either endorse or obfuscate Boris Johnson's repeated lies. I wonder whether you feel that they are laughing quite specifically and quite directly at you and yours. 03456060973 is the number that you need. And we find ourselves now in the quite remarkable position of having a Prime Minister who claimed that the party had never occurred, but today he will be called upon to take action against a senior member of his staff who has been laughing about the fact 4 days after the reported party and almost casting themselves, all of them, in that room. Although, I listen, I'm not making excuses for anybody, but the more junior you are in that room, the harder it would have been not to join in. We've all been there, in our 20s in particular. I'm not making excuses for anybody, but you go for the senior people in scenarios like that, and in this case it's Allegra Stratton. I'm genuinely really upset, actually. I have not suffered particularly during this lockdown, but I've had the very difficult privilege over the last nearly 2 years of speaking to people who have. Whether it is people that have buried loved ones after going for months without seeing them, whether it is people who've witnessed or seen or met for the first time their newly born granddaughter through the patio windows on Christmas morning, whether it's people that attended funerals on Zoom. That's the closest I've come to real heartbreak, was one of my very best friends who died towards the end of last year, and we had to conduct almost all of the ceremonies and the celebrations of his life over Zoom, which was not fair. It was not adequate. I daren't check the date, just in case. I daren't check the date, just in case they were at that party. Because if they were, I don't know, something would snap inside me. I have another problem this morning, which is I have been telling you for now the best part of, 2.5 years, precisely what these people are made of. I've been explaining it to you at length and in detail. I have been describing it to you with receipts, chapter and verse. And yet I know today that you may still not be ready to admit what we've done. They laugh about it. I know this will sound odd, and it's coming up to 10 minutes after 10. If you can put a sincere spin on this, not a pretend one. I don't want you to channel Malcolm Tucker or come out like a sort of comedy character. If you can put a sincere spin on this, if you can look the rest of us in the eye this morning and tell us why we shouldn't be apoplectic with rage or heartbroken with misery at the idea of the people who were telling us what to do, not only laughing about it 4 days later, laughing about riding roughshod over all the rules and regulations. But for some reason, that Jacob Rees-Mogg clip from Monday night seems to me to make everything worse. A year later, having been court banged to rights, surrounded by his secretly funded cronies in his think tank environment, he thinks and he knows that he is still free to make jokes about it. He's still free to talk with impunity about something that has, I think, cut to the very quick of the country's patience, the country's tolerance, the country's sense of common decency. I have read a little about the Crown Estate having some form of legal exemption from the rules that the rest of the country were required to follow. It would be a little bit like a diplomatic immunity on embassy grounds or something like that. I don't know whether they'll try and wriggle off the hook using that rather recondite reasoning. I don't know whether he'll try and throw Allegra Stratton under a bus. He hasn't sacked anybody yet, remember, not really. Dominic Cummings was sort of squeezed out after setting the bar so unspeakably high for lying to the British public and again being backed by every single member of every single cabinet that Boris Johnson has appointed. So I don't know whether or not something significant is going to happen today. I don't know what's going to happen at PMQs. We'll be all over it at 12 noon today. And I don't know whether there's anything you can think of currently that would constitute sufficient remorse, that would constitute sufficient response. I genuinely don't. I can't think of anything. I can't think of anything except the people who've broken down on the programme since this nightmare began. And the people who didn't see their loved ones in their final months. The people who put enormously important celebrations and commemorations on ice because they were obeying the rules. The people who possibly were denied the final touch, the final physical touch with their mothers or their fathers or even, God forbid, their children because they were obeying the rules introduced by Boris Johnson, the rules amplified to the nation by Allegra Stratton, the rules mocked and derided even this week by Jacob Rees-Mogg, a man who thinks nothing of misleading the Queen herself, who thinks nothing of presiding over a proroguing of Parliament, and who even in the last 4 weeks has tried to rip up the only rule book the people of Britain have left to hold their MPs to account because his mate, Owen Paterson, had been found to have ridden contemptuously all over it. But then I remember that I'm me and you're you, and this stuff really gets to me. Not every day, not even every month, but every now and then the absolutely irrefutable evidence appears in front of you that this is as bad can be, and they are in charge of our country. They are presiding over a masterclass in incompetence, obfuscation, deceit, dishonesty, and contempt. And still the polls tell us it's neck and neck. Still the polls tell us it's 50-50. I know why. I think Brian, Nick's last caller, nailed it really beautifully, actually. Incredibly articulate call, simply describing himself as someone who doesn't normally get involved, someone who normally lets it all wash over him, somebody who possibly, although he didn't say this, subscribes to that school of thought we examined in detail yesterday that could be loosely described as they're all as bad as each other. We also, of course, yesterday cautiously concluded, or at least I did, that we should probably retain the parliamentary tradition that prevents MPs from calling each other liars in the House of Commons. I wonder whether that 52-48 ratio that I described to you to distill my own feelings on the matter will shift a little bit when Keir Starmer stands up shortly after 12 noon today and addresses a Prime Minister who wouldn't know the truth if it sat on his head. Or maybe that's not fair, of course. Because the worst liars are the ones that know they're lying. There's a weird sort of delusional pathology to the liars who are so far down the rabbit hole of self-deception, they don't even know what the truth is anymore. There's plenty of them in the current cabinet, but I don't know whether Boris Johnson is one of them. All I know is, right now, today, they are dedicating every ounce of energy that this country's political establishment possesses to trying to protect the Prime Minister and his closest aides. They should have been talking to you about new walking clinics. They should have been interviewing Sajid Javid. He wouldn't come on this show, but he should have been on Nick Ferrari's show. He should have been on every other show in town today, telling you about new walking clinics, really putting some oomph into the booster regime, really giving information about how you, if you're worried about it, can get that vaccine into your veins. But they don't think that's as important as closing ranks around Boris Johnson, circling the wagons and trying once again to pass off his lies to the British public. They did it at Barnard Castle. They'll do it again today. Will they get away with it? 0345 60 60 973. I think I've been doing this job too long to feel much optimism that the pendulum will slowly swing back to where we were before and people will come out of this claiming that he's doing his best or he's been treated unfairly or, oh, thank goodness, he's in charge because Jeremy Corbyn would have been even worse. I genuinely don't know what life raft you would cling to as you're tossed about by the flotsam and jetsam that passes for a government in this country. What are you clinging to? Tell me. I'll try not to have a row with you today, although I warn you, my dander is high. How do you cling to it now? You put your trust in this man. Forget the B word for now. You put your trust in him. And he surrounded himself with people who laugh at you. Love for you, Margaret, and for your family. I'm sure that you knew that already, but just to articulate that a lot of people getting in touch to pass on their very, very best to you and your family. And what a horrible business to contemplate and then see that the people in charge were behaving in this fashion as long ago as last May, the 15th of May 2020. Wine, spirits and pizza inside and outside the building. A Johnson spokesman claiming that Downing Street staff were working in the garden in the afternoon and evening. And calmly now. Calmly. Is there the vaguest possibility that that's true? Okay, you can work with a glass of wine in your hand. You can work with a round of cheese on the table in front of you. There are 19 people in this picture, and there is not a single pen or computer to be seen. I think Margaret has reminded me that the stuff I do for my job sometimes gets diluted by the fact that it's my job. She's also reminded me of my friend, who we lost last December. And it's not just news, it's not just topics. And will that make the phones ring? Or what have you got to say about this today? It is literally life and death. And the idea that in the midst of the lockdown, the people tasked with running the country, following, I think, indubitably following the lead of the Prime Minister, the people tasked with running the country had a cheese and wine party. When you quite possibly would have been prevented from attending the funeral of a loved one. The bigger the family, the more likely it would be that you couldn't have attended a funeral. Certainly university friends of Margaret's son-in-law couldn't attend his funeral. And these are scars that stay forever, aren't they? that little girl, 3 years old. Not just the loss, because who knows what may have panned out differently, but the exacerbation of the loss, the magnification of the loss by the circumstances, by not being able to say goodbye, by being denied that simple human contact that may, just as the years pass, have provided some sort of succour that she has been robbed of by the virus. Then to see these people, and do you know what? I don't think they're all bad people. I think, as we're fond of saying on the programme, a fish rots from the head down. You follow, don't you, the lead. We all do. We're all a little bit deferential in our way. If the boss is behaving in a certain way, then you're more likely to behave in that way yourself. I certainly don't think they should all be strung up in the media. But it's just gross. And what I think has prompted the response on the programme today, which has taken me by surprise. It's one of those days where if you're trying to get through, you'll know every line's been chock-a-block since 10 this morning. And I sometimes get confused. This is what I mean a bit by the fact that I do it for job, for work, robbing me slightly of perspective on the life and death element of it. But I think it's the lies, isn't it? It's the lies that have resonated even more than the picture. So you've got the picture. The picture was knocking around yesterday. We've had a night to digest the picture. But it's the lies this morning. It's Dominic Raab turning up in the studios claiming that it was a work meeting. Is there any possibility at all that it could have been a work meeting if there's not a pen or a piece of paper or a laptop computer in sight? There's one way it could be proved. Publish the minutes. But the photograph I'm looking at doesn't feature anybody taking minutes. It's got Dominic Cummings drinking wine and a couple on the grass. I don't know whether they're canoodling or not, but they're certainly not discussing important matters of state. Or if they are, no one's taking notes. I think that's it. It's funny some mornings, isn't it, that we get to spend together and you sort of find yourself groping in the dark almost for what it is that we're talking about. That's partly because I'm a bit of an amateur, but also partly because the closer you get to the humanity of these moments, I think the harder sometimes it can be to grasp. And it's the knowledge, it's the memories, it's the comparisons and the contrasts between what we have done and what we have been through. And very few of us, thankfully, have been through anything like what Margaret and her daughter and her granddaughter have been through. But we've been through stuff, really bad stuff. We've lost people. And it just doesn't seem right that they would lie to us about something like this. I could have mounted a defence of the gathering, possibly, if I worked for them, just about. And then you'd have reminded me about the footage of Allegra Stratton laughing about it, nervously, to give her a bit of defence, laughing nervously, not laughing callously or contemptuously, I don't think, I don't know. But you could say, look, we got a bit, what's the word for when you get a bit caught up in the moment, you know, like almost demob happy. We were so stressed that every now and then, so you know, you don't know what it was like in that building. Remember that we were the ones counting the deaths and counting the casualties, and every now and then it just tipped over a little bit into socialising that obviously in retrospect we wish we hadn't done. I don't know whether you'd forgive them. I don't know whether you'd believe them. But they sent Dominic Raab out to lie to you instead. And Johnson didn't even go to a Cobra meeting yesterday. What was he doing? What was he doing? They're just nearly 2 years now. And every day demonstrates that nothing that has gone before has changed their mind or influenced their thinking in any way, shape or form. You've still got Brexit hardman Steve Baker and his regiment of the furiously hard of thinking, trying to argue that they know better than the scientists about what we should do next. So Johnson, and God forbid anyone should feel a scintilla of sympathy for the man, but he's now getting pretty clear guidance from his scientists, just like he did last December. And you remember what happened when he resisted it. 60,000 people died. And it's happening again. And I think all of these things, some mornings, just coalesce in our consciousness to create a real sense of bleakness and betrayal. Betrayal. I don't know. And when he stood up in the House of Commons on the 8th of December last year and said that, he knew that they'd celebrated his birthday. So the suggestion that everything he does is predicated upon the possibility that he might just get away with it for another 24 hours, I think now has become carved in stone. I don't think, even if you have still got a little picture of him up on your pencil case, you still now must acknowledge that every single thing he does is designed to postpone, hopefully, judgment and scrutiny. And if he can postpone it for long enough, then the weight of the knowledge of what he's done becomes lighter. So on the 8th of December 2021, he stood up in the House of Commons and said the words that you've just heard, in full knowledge that on the 19th of June 2020, they'd had a knees up. I don't care whether it lasted 10 minutes or 10 hours. They'd had a knees up in the Cabinet Office, the room where, as Adam Wagner has just suggested, many of these rules would have been written. It is truly breathtaking. So part of me wants to return to David Widness's text and just ask, what did you do to celebrate your birthday on the 19th of June 2020, if you can remember? And I will keep a few phone lines free for that. I just want to know. 0345 60 60 973. And the other part of me is still fascinated by what you would call the culture. I can see that breaking news, the Metropolitan Police is investigating the Downing Street parties. Well, it won't take long, Dame Dick. It won't take long at all. Guilty, I think, is probably the conclusion that you're going to have to arrive at if the evidence as it has already been presented to the public is correct. The stuff they're not even denying, a gathering of more than two people, more than one person in a room for a social event that had nothing to do with work. I'll tell you what, when you've only got Nadine Dorries and George Eustace batting for you, you begin, surely, even if you're Boris Johnson, to wonder whether the game might be up. So, 3 questions then. Is it up? Is the game up now for Boris Johnson? 0345 60 60 973. How did you celebrate your birthday on the 19th of June 2020? 0345 60 60 973. And would you like to join me in an attempt to unpick, in a sensible and comprehensible fashion, what happened on that day? What happened? Why was nobody in that room? This is the bit I don't get. You think how careful you were being, how careful your mum was being, how careful your kids were being. The bit I don't get is this. Message goes round, we're all gathering in the Cabinet Office to give Boris a birthday cake. I use his Christian name in the context of what those conversations would have sounded like at the time. We're all gathering in the Cabinet Office to give Boris a birthday cake. Do you have any insights at all into how that happens without any major objection, without, a significant number of people? How come everybody stays quiet? I don't quite get that. I've never been in a cult. I've never worked in an environment where it was required that you never questioned the authority or the decisions of the people above you. I've always enjoyed a degree of freedom to at least ask questions, even if the answer is no, nope, back in your box, O'Brien. You can at least... How do you think that bit happened? Oh, we're all getting together. Have you heard? Keith, everyone in the Cabinet Office at 2:00. We're doing a big cake for Boris. And you're standing there watching him blow out the bloody candles. And you think, hang on, what's his wife doing here? Now, some debate, some argument over whether or not it was organised by colleagues or his wife. Doesn't matter. She was in the room. How's that? What's she doing in the Cabinet Office? And who's that lady over there? Oh, that's the decorator. Oh, but don't call her a decorator. She's an interior designer. Oh, okay. What the hell is she doing in the Cabinet Office? Well, don't worry. It's not as if we're doing any work. It's a party. Oh. Every way you look at this story, it falls to pieces. If the interior designer was just waiting to talk, the decorator was just waiting to talk to the Prime Minister, well, what was she waiting for? Well, she was waiting for the party to finish. Oh, it wasn't a party. She was attending a work event. What's her role in government? She's the decorator. Oh. It was a gathering of colleagues. What's Carrie Johnson's job? Oh. I would have thought at some point in the last few years, the idea of Nadine Dorries being the only one left defending Boris Johnson would have been both utterly plausible and completely heartbreaking. It's tragic, isn't it, to watch this unfold? And I'll tell you what's underway now, more so on social media than news media, but what's underway now is the shift from defending Boris Johnson, who's not done anything wrong, to demanding that journalists stop doing their job. And history has some fairly profound lessons to teach us about what happens when sections of the population are persuaded to demand that journalists stop reporting facts. Well, you don't even have to go back that far. Have a look at January the 6th in America of last year, when journalists stopped reporting facts. So, hashtag scum media and all this sort of thing. What do you want? I want a media that doesn't tell me the truth about stuff that the people in power are doing. Well, do you? Do you really? Very dilute defence of Boris Johnson today is a man who made his money selling get-rich-quick schemes on the internet under a false name before achieving high office in the current Conservative Party. The woman undertaking the investigation into the Downing Street parties was only appointed after the man undertaking an investigation into the Downing Street parties was found to have attended a Downing Street party. And Cressida Dick sat there thinking, not yet, lads, not yet. Take it easy, it's all under control. The bloke who was going to do it can't do it because he was at one of the parties, so we found a woman who's going to do it instead. Oh, and she'll be reporting to the Prime Minister who, Today is the day that the Metropolitan Commissioner, Police Commissioner decides, do you know what, actually, that's quite a lot of smoke. That's a lot of smoke. Maybe there's some fire. I don't get that. I don't get any of it. I do this for a living. I don't get how he could give that speech and go back to Downing Street and not get punched by a colleague going, I told you we shouldn't have been having parties. Actually, Dominic Cummings wasn't in the building by then, so possibly that would have happened. I don't get how they can only today decide at Scotland Yard that there is something to see here, please don't move along. And I don't get how the mindset in the building, in Boris Johnson's brain, can be so twisted, so riddled with self-regard and exceptionalism, that he sits there announcing the rules, serious face, announcing the rules to the country, while knowing that he broke them last night. And he's going to break them again tomorrow. And when he's not even there, such is the scale of the corruption that has filtered down from the top, they're going to get leathered in the garden on the night before Prince Philip's funeral. Indoors, outdoors, inside, outside, shake it all about side. They're going to send someone to Tesco's with a wheelie suitcase to bring back a bucket load of booze. Why? Because Boris Johnson's in charge and anything goes. And besides, if they were going to complain about us having our knees up on the night before Prince Philip's funeral, then who is he to talk? He had a blinking birthday party attended by his decorator. Sorry, not a party, just a crime. You can't prejudice a police investigation, which is the phrase that the Metropolitan Police has issued. I'll say one thing quickly, because it seems quite pertinent today, and it's quite personal, but I sometimes use my personal experiences as a lens through which to look at a story and then invite you to do the same. I think, like many people in this country, I grew up having probably a slightly excessive level of trust in both the police and the medical establishment. I've seen an awful lot of people. I've seen the horrors that can occur when trust in the medical establishment gets corrupted and undermined. But it should never be absolute and blind. There's a reason why the phrase second opinion is a figure of speech, isn't there? There's a reason why, can I see it? Can I get a second opinion? The first thing you hear from the first doctor is not necessarily going to be completely true. I think that's called white coat syndrome, the idea that they're all infallible. And that's a dangerous path to go down. Similarly, the police, you're raised to trust the police, right? You're raised to go to a policeman if you get lost. In for me, it was Glossop Market in 1975. Find a police officer, tell him you've lost your mummy. And as you grow older, it begins to, especially if you're a bit naughty, it probably begins to change a bit, that relationship. But there is still a foundation stone of civilized society involves having trust in the institutions, having trust in the police. Mine got shaken to the core by Operation Midland, actually. We did a lot on this programme to cover the allegations described as credible and true that turned out to be nothing of the sort, but they were described, the Carl Beach allegations about various VIPs and paedophilia. They were described by a senior investigating officer as credible and true. So naively, perhaps, most of the British media didn't stop to question whether or not they could be an absolute pile of crud, an absolute pile of rubbish. Credible and true are such powerful words. So you realise, or I realise, as a consequence of that investigation and that report, the Daily Mail at one point claimed that it was a victory for the Daily Mail and the Truth when Beach's allegations were described as credible and true. I realise that police officers are just fallible human beings like the rest of us, so they can do stupid things. They can make terrible mistakes. I hope they've made a terrible mistake today, because the alternative to me is almost unbearable. The alternative is that they have been politicised. Someone who is a lot better versed than I am in covering the relationship between government and police tells me that the governments are always trying to put pressure upon the Metropolitan Police. They're always trying to politicise stories. They're always trying to get the Met to do what's best for the government. And that commissioners of the Metropolitan Police historically turn around and say, sod off. They historically turn around and say no. I hesitate to say this because I am quietly patriotic and very proud of the institutions that hold this country together. I can't come up with much of an explanation for what's happening today that doesn't involve Cressida Dick being a commissioner of the Metropolitan Police who, when government come calling, asking for the Metropolitan Police to act in their own interest, in the interest of the government, doesn't say no, doesn't say clear off. Awful lot of mystery surrounding the question of why she retains her job after countless scandals and I mean, from Sarah Everard, God rest her soul, right back to Daniel Morgan, and of course John Charles de Menezes, which she, I think, was in operational control of when that innocent man was shot dead on the London Underground. So many cases that Cressida Dick has personal involvement in, which are in the annals of the greatest scandals ever undertaken by the Metropolitan Police Service. So that's what one question, and I hate this because I don't do conspiracies. I just don't. I don't buy them for a whole heap of reasons. And this isn't really a conspiracy. This is a thesis. This is a hypothesis, a theory that you're welcome to disprove. And there'll be lots of people listening to this program who have much more experience of the law than I do, either as lawyers or as officers of law and order. Awful lot of people telling me that white coat syndrome, or is it just the same person sending loads of tweets? No, sorry, I got white coat syndrome wrong. It's not what I thought it was. It's when your blood pressure is higher when a doctor takes it because you're nervous in the doctor's surgery than it is when you do it yourself at home. There you go. I'm glad we cleared that up. That's the first mistake of the day. Chalked up and ticked off. 12 minutes after 10 is the time. And that is, for me, at the moment, the most likely explanation is that this investigation has been politicised. They tried to confine it to Sue Gray, which gives them a modicum of hope that they'll be able to control it. Sue Gray ultimately, of course, reports to the Prime Minister, so they are in a way marking their own homework. And they can't do that now because the Metropolitan Police have been shown evidence by Sue Gray that prompted them to think that a police investigation was necessary. And now the Metropolitan Police have called for Sue Gray's report to not contain details of the alleged offences that the Metropolitan Police are investigating. What I want you to do, ideally, because I'd love to end this conversation this morning feeling a little bit more optimistic about the state of the Met. I really would, because I think it is part of the glue that holds our society together. An imperfect, a flawed, on occasions institutionally racist and institutionally corrupt organisation, according to hugely influential and important reports into its operations. Let's be under no illusions about that. Despite my personal naivety and possibly optimism about what the future may hold, institutionally racist, according to McPherson, institutionally corrupt, according to the Daniel Morgan inquiry, but equally That's all we've got, guys. It's all we've got. All we've got is the rule of law and the Metropolitan Police. All that keeps us different from Russia or North Korea or whatever else, Bolsonaro's Brazil. All we have is the rule of law and the police. The judiciary, under attack, of course, inevitably from the Daily Mail, enemies of the people. These people are not your friends if they attack the judges. But that's all we've got. We've got the judiciary, we've got the police, and we've got the rule of law. And incredibly, for all their myriad flaws and failings and, for my money, moral transgressions, the Conservative Party, historically, is supposed to be the most doughty guardian of that triumvirate of security, the judiciary, the police, the rule of law. Conservatives, when I was growing up, were supposed to cherish them more than almost anybody else did. Lefties were the ones that were pushing at the boundaries of the rule of law. Lefties were the one having the protests and needing that the Tories would bring in legislation. But the rule of law, the police and the judiciary, that's pretty much all we've got. Some might say some journalists as well. But when you want to speak truth to power, when you want to hold the most powerful people to account, the judiciary, the police, the rule of law are really the first and last lines of defence for ordinary people. And I can't see right now an explanation of what the Met have done today that doesn't speak to the politicisation of the entire process. An attempt by government to get the Metropolitan Police to do what is best for Boris Johnson. Not what is best for the country, not what is best for the truth, not what is best for justice, but what is best for Boris Johnson. I suppose we should start with the good news that we are still here. But when it comes to our international reputation, our political establishment, the sanctity, if you allow that word, of our parliament and the state of our nation, then the news is sort of less good. The scenes in the House of Commons yesterday, I don't know how much of them you witnessed personally, how much you heard reported later in the day after we'd said goodbye on LBC. The scenes in the House of Commons yesterday have no place in a functioning democracy. The way in which Boris Johnson infects everything and everybody he comes into contact with has, in the last fortnight, extended to the Metropolitan Police Service and our sovereign parliament. Some of the comments he made yesterday in response to the best speech by some distance of Keir Starmer's career are beneath contempt, regardless of your politics. If you care a jot for this country, not just for its international reputation, but for its national integrity, if you care one jot for this country that you call home, then you should have felt deep disgust at Boris Johnson's performance yesterday. And it was a performance, remember, prompted by the findings of a report he was forced to commission after details of countless parties that had been held in or on the grounds of his office, and which he frequently and repeatedly denied after those allegations were found to be true. It is almost impossible, even when you do this every day, and I mean that, whether you're doing the talking like I am or the listening like you currently are, although you will be invited to do the talking shortly, it is almost impossible to keep a lid or to keep a grip upon things. The way in which we've gone from the claim that there weren't any parties to the claim that the rules were obeyed and there may have been gatherings, to the claim that if there were, I certainly didn't know about them or attend them, to the claim that, well, actually they were and I did know about them because I did attend them, but I didn't realise they were parties, to the defence of birthday cakes and now claims of an ABBA-themed knees-up in the actual prime ministerial flat, the one that he... God, I'm sorry. Because right there it is. There it is. This is how it works. This is what we're losing. Because right there, I mentioned the prime ministerial flat. And you know how my brain works by now. So there's this little synapse somewhere at the back of my brain. Go, whoa, what about the wallpaper? So you start talking about one scandal, and then the snowballing effect of that scandal, i.e. the parties, or as we prefer to call it, the breaking of the laws that the rest of us obeyed by the man who made the laws and then lied about them, including in Parliament. And that little synapse in your brain, because you just mention the flat and you try and find the words to describe the scandal surrounding the decoration of the flat, the WhatsApp that he forgot. So you can't, it's so hard to keep a clear speed ahead of you. So you start talking about one scandal, and immediately two more have kicked in. Number one, trying to get money off a Conservative donor to tart up the flat in a way that even Dominic Cummings found to be egregious. And then number two, claiming that he had no memory of it because he had changed phones and his WhatsApp had not been transferred from one phone to this. So, and there it is already, 6 minutes after 10, and your humble correspondent has lost the thread already. And I never lose the thread. Well, all right, I sometimes lose the thread. But that's incredible. So it's almost as if, and this is the challenge, of course, that the opposition faces, and that includes opposition in his own party, of which, please God, there'll be some soon, because this cannot continue. This is a national tragedy, entirely self-inflicted national tragedy now. And that's the problem that his opponents face, whether they're in the Conservative Party, whether they're on opposition benches, or whether they are the tiny, tiny, tiny little corners of the media that aren't completely in the pockets of the various non-Dom billionaires who installed Boris Johnson in Downing Street in the first place. I told you this was going to happen. It's not quite a Keith get the tin moment, I don't think, but it's probably up there. I told you this was going to happen. I told you that he would hang on and hang on. The fury that surrounded the revelations regarding the parties, the carousing, the knees-ups, the suitcases full of booze, the wine fridge, and the sheer scale, the number of actual parties that were being thrown in Downing Street and its environs when we were not allowed to hug our mothers or visit dying relatives or attend nephew and niece's funerals. I told you what was going to happen. I told you his gamble, his calculation would be to keep it at bay for as long as he could until his client journalists and sycophantic supporters could be relied upon to start claiming that it didn't matter. If I was even more self-obsessed than I am already, and if I had a slightly more pliant producer, I would have dug out the clips of me actually predicting, but these are professionals that I work with and they can't be expected to trawl back over past episodes of the programme massaging my ego retrospectively. I do plenty of that my own, but I would have played out the clips of me telling you how this was going to play out. They're probably out there. It probably got clipped up at the time, actually. I told you this is what was going to happen. He'll kick it down there. So first of all, deny that it happened. You remember when he denied that it happened? He actually denied there were no parties. Second of all, there were some parties, but I definitely didn't go to them. How's he going to get out of that when we've got evidence that he did? Third of all, I did go to what you folks might possibly refer to as a party, but I didn't when I attended that party, I didn't realise it was a party. I believed it was a work gathering. So there it is. Stage 1, 2, 3. Number 1, no parties. Number 2, parties, but I didn't go. Number 3, parties, but I did go, but I didn't realise it was a party. Can't even claim it wasn't a party because every other... Good Lord, I nearly used a word there that I'm not allowed to use on the radio. I mean, there's only one word that comes after every other, especially if you were brought up by parents from Yorkshire. So, number 1, no parties. Number 2, there were parties, but I didn't go. Number 3, all right, there were parties, and I did go, but I didn't realise it was a party. I can't claim that it wasn't a party because every other beggar realised that it was a party, especially when they were all told to bring a blinking bottle. Where does he go after that, you asked me? And I told you. Well, where he goes after that is just hoping that he can keep it in the long grass for long enough for it not to matter when the guillotine comes down. And you said to me in your thousands, that won't work, James, that won't work. We're too cross, And I said to you, I promise you that's what he'll try to do. I thought it wouldn't work because I thought the guillotine would have fallen by now. I thought the report would have come back. And then, of course, I don't think there's any massive conspiracy in the corridors of power. But who knows these days, frankly, given that Cressida Dick was allowed to hang on to her post despite presiding over an absolute avalanche of appalling conduct by members of her police service. The Sue Gray report, first of all, he commissioned someone else. You forget all of this. Are we actually going to be able to get the chronology right? What time is it? 6 minutes after 11. So let's start again. Number one, there were no parties. Number two, there were parties, but I didn't go to them. Number three, there were parties, and I did go to them, but I didn't realise they were parties, even though every other beggar there did. Number four, I will commission a report into these parties. Number five, I'm going to have to replace the person conducting the report into these parties, because it turns out that the person I appointed to conduct a report into these parties attended at least one of these parties. Number six, we'll find someone new to conduct a report into these parties. Number seven, the Metropolitan Police have decided... No. Number one, there weren't any parties. Number two, there were parties, but I didn't attend any parties. Number three, there were parties and I did attend the parties, but I didn't realise they were parties, even though every other beggar at the parties realised they were parties. Number four, I will commission an inquiry into these parties. Number five, I will now have to replace the person who I commissioned to conduct an inquiry into these parties, because it turned out that he attended one of these parties. Number six, I will now appoint Sue Gray to conduct this inquiry, and we'll get a fairly quick response, because number seven, the Metropolitan Police will not be getting involved in this, because they don't investigate events retrospectively. Number eight, the Metropolitan Police actually do investigate such events respectively, and therefore they will be investigating these parties, which means that number 7, 8, 9, we can't get the Sue Gray report in its entirety until the police have conducted their inquiries. Number 10, the police are still conducting their inquiries and have now moved from 100 questionnaires to number 11 actually interviewing people. And number 12, here it is. Here's Richard Littlejohn in the Daily Mail and various other members of the client media telling you, oh, it doesn't matter after all. Remember when you were really angry? What? Weeks ago, about the fact that you couldn't go to your grandmother's funeral or kiss your mum or visit your dying father in a care home? You remember when you were really angry about that? Well, wind your neck in, Doris, because it doesn't really matter. Calm down, dear, because none of that was important, and all of this is just confected by angry Ramonas who can't forgive Boris Johnson for lying to them every single time he opens his mouth. We love being lied to, and you Ramonas should frankly get over the fact that you hated and think it has no place in either British democracy or number 10 Downing Street. So we're there. We're at point 12, with apologies for any points I might have missed on that path from there weren't any parties right through to, yep, there were, and I went to them, and I filled my boots, and I had a bottle of Prosecco, and I did the flipping conga with Nadine blooming Dorries, and none of it matters because, Ramonas. We're there. I mean, how big do the brushstrokes have to be? How big a paintbrush do I need for you to see that what I've just described has actually happened in real time in front of your very eyes over the course of the last few weeks? And now the media is full of people claiming, oh, the parties don't matter. The parties don't matter. It's just a vendetta. Lying. Lying and lying again. Doesn't matter. Oh, and there's a war on. There's a war on, so the fact that we've got a completely untrustworthy Prime Minister who is regarded with a mixture of derision and disgust by every other leader in the European Congress, the European Compact, doesn't matter at all. No, what we've got to do is keep the man who's a massive liar and regarded with derision and disgust by all of our major allies. We've got to keep him in post, because otherwise it will... I'll tell you what would be really bad, getting rid of the bloke who everybody else thinks is ridiculous. The logic of this is beyond even the most kindergartenish of political grasps. You've got to keep the bloke in place. You've got to keep the bloke in place despite the fact that he lied, because there's a war on and all of our potential allies in that war think he's an absolute clown car.